Section 1. The screen time report flickers on the glass. 4 hours, 12 minutes. It is 2:14 a.m. The room is bathed in a cold, 6,500 Kelvin clinical blue, cutting through the shadows like a blade. On the nightstand, a half-empty glass of water has gathered dust. The air is stagnant. The only sound, the faint, high-frequency hum of a lithium-ion battery struggling under the load of 1,000 background processes. Your thumb, the primary instrument of your own subversion, hovers inches above the glass, twitching with a residual ghost-like momentum. It has traveled several miles tonight, scrolling through a vertical desert that has no end, no boundary, and no horizon. When we examine the evidence, we don't find a person who lacks discipline. We find a victim of a high-precision digital heist. In the field of human-computer interaction, there is a concept known as stopping rules. These are the natural cues: the end of a chapter, the blank space at the bottom of a newspaper page, the end card at the close of a film. That signal to the brain that a discrete unit of consumption has concluded. These cues allow for cognitive satiety, the psychological state of being full or finished. But in the architecture of the infinite scroll, the stopping rule has been surgically removed. This is not a failure of your character. It is the success of an algorithm designed to bypass your executive function. The engineers at the major platforms didn't just build a feature. They built a ludic loop, a closed system of repetitive behavior fueled by the uncertainty of what comes next. They took the physical world's natural friction and sanded it down until your attention had nothing to grip onto. Now let's enter the crime scene and audit the mechanisms of your hijacked mind. We begin the forensic reconstruction by looking at the refresh gesture, the pull-down to load mechanic. It's no coincidence that it mimics the lever of a slot machine. When the user pulls down, there is a variable delay, a micro moment of tension before the new content populates. This is intermittent reinforcement in its purest form. If every scroll yielded a reward, the brain would habituate and grow bored. But because only some scrolls yield a dopamine hit, the brain stays locked in a state of perpetual anticipation. We call this the Bottomless Bowl effect. In a landmark study, researchers used self-refilling bowls to trick participants into consuming 73% more soup than those with normal bowls. The subjects didn't feel more full. They simply lacked the visual cue to stop. Your social feed is that soup bowl. As we audit the telemetry of a typical session, we see the sunk cost of attention. The user stays for 5 minutes, then 10. By the 20-minute mark, the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for long-term planning and impulse control, is effectively offline, bypassed by the more primitive reward circuitry of the ventral striatum. The stopping rule is gone, replaced by a frictionless void. The design is intended to keep you in a flow state that isn't productive, but predatory. The evidence suggests a total collapse of agency. The user is no longer choosing what to see. They are merely reacting to what is being served. The physical toll is evident in the dilated pupils and the elevated cortisol levels found in chronic users. We observe a phenomenon known as post-scroll fatigue, the realization that hours have vanished into a digital slipstream, leaving behind nothing but a profound sense of cognitive depletion and brain fog. This is the signature of a successful exploit. The house has won, and the currency it collected was your time. Section 2. To understand why the thumb refuses to stop, we must deconstruct the mechanical anatomy of the infinite scroll. This is not an accidental design evolution. It is a weaponized UI pattern. In the early days of the web, the pagination model reigned. You reached the end of a page, you clicked Next, and in that microsecond of loading, a choice was required. That click was friction point, a structural pause that allowed the prefrontal cortex to check in and ask, "Are we done here?" In 2006, the industry introduced the infinite scroll, and the digital horizon vanished. By removing the Next button, engineers effectively removed the exit sign from the theater. When we audit the source code of a modern social feed, we see the implementation of the Intersection Observer API. This is the silent sentry. As you scroll, the browser tracks how close you are to the bottom of the current content block. Before you even reach the edge of the visible world, a fetch request is sent to the server. New data is injected into the document object model, DOM, milliseconds before your eyes arrive. The result is a seamless, frictionless descent. There is no loading state to break the trance, no boundary to trigger a stopping rule. It is an architectural sleight of hand designed to keep the nervous system in a state of perpetual pursuit. This brings us to the core of the exploit, the ludic loop. This term, popularized in the study of slot machine addiction, describes a state of total absorption triggered by a rapid self-reinforcing cycle of stimulus and response. In a ludic loop, the search becomes more rewarding than the find. Neuroimaging reveals that the ventral striatum, the brain's reward center, spikes not when we see a post we like, but in the anticipation of what the next flick of the thumb might reveal. This is the dopamine search protocol. Evolution designed this system to keep us foraging for scarce resources. The algorithm, however, has repurposed it to keep us foraging through an infinite pile of digital scrap. As we peer deeper into the mechanism, we find the variable reward schedule. If the feed were predictably interesting, you would eventually reach satiety. But the algorithm is programmed to be inconsistent. It sandwiches mediocre content between high-value triggers, a notification, a provocative headline, a highly aesthetic image. This unpredictability is the psychological glue. Because you don't know when the next hit is coming, you are compelled to keep scrolling to find it. We find evidence of this in the pull-to-refresh mechanic, a haptic gesture that mirrors the physical tension of a slot machine lever. The micro-delay, the spinning icon, is a deliberate psychological tether. It creates a wait state that heightens the dopamine release upon the eventual reveal. The engineering objective here is the elimination of cognitive load. Every time a user has to make a decision, to click a link, to change a page, to close a tab, it requires a small amount of mental energy. By making the feed infinite, the designers have reduced the cost of staying to near zero, while the cost of leaving, the fear of missing out on the next variable reward, remains high. We call this frictionless design, but from a forensic perspective, it is better described as a cognitive trap. We must also audit the concept of unitization. Humans are biologically wired to complete units. We finish the meal, we finish the book, we finish the task. When the digital unit is the feed, and the feed is infinite, the completion instinct is weaponized against the user. You stay because your brain is searching for a finish line that has been intentionally deleted from the code. The result is a state of attentional inertia. Once you start the scroll, it is physically and neurologically easier to continue than it is to stop. The system is designed to exploit the physical law of momentum. An object in motion stays in motion until acted upon by an external force. But in the vacuum of the screen, there are no external forces, no clocks, no page numbers, no natural light. During our audit, we see the dark pattern of autoplay compounding the issue. In a video-centric feed, the transition between units is not just frictionless, it is forced. Before the brain can process the end of one stimulus, the next has already begun. This creates a sensory overlap that prevents the user from achieving cognitive closure. We find that users in this state often report a feeling of being possessed, a literal loss of agency where the hand moves independently of the will. The data is clear. The infinite scroll is a predatory exploit of the human orienting response. It turns the eyes into high-frequency receptors and the thumb into a mindless actuator. It is the digital equivalent of a casino with no windows and no clocks, where the house is an AI optimized for a single metric: time on device. We are not looking at a tool that serves the user. We are looking at a system that harvests the user. The bottomless bowl is not a metaphor. It is a calculated mathematical reality of the modern attention economy. Section 3. The audit reveals a stark reality. You cannot outwill an algorithm that never sleeps. To survive the bottomless bowl, you must out-engineer it. We begin the restoration of agency by reintroducing the very thing the designers spent billions of dollars to eliminate: friction. If the infinite scroll is a slipway, we must transform it into a gravel pit. The first protocol is the de-weaponization of the visual field. We call this chromatographic neutralization. By shifting your device to grayscale, you strip the ludic loop of its primary aesthetic bait. The notification red, F,000 loses its biological urgency. The vibrant, high-saturation imagery designed to trigger the ventral striatum becomes a dull, gray wash. When the visual reward is muted, the dopamine search protocol finds less purchase. You are no longer looking at a slot machine. You are looking at a clinical data terminal. Next, we must install an artificial horizon. Since the platform has deleted its stopping rules, you must manifest your own. This requires the implementation of a hard stop via third-party lockout tools that do not rely on your self-control. We are looking for system-level interventions, apps that force a pagination-style break every 60 seconds of scrolling or hard-close the application after a 10-minute window. This recreates the next button effect, forcing the prefrontal cortex to re-engage and evaluate the cognitive cost of staying. We then move to environmental digital feng shui. The physical cost of access must be raised. The phone should not be an appendage, it must be a destination. By moving the device to a separate room or placing it inside a high-friction container, a timed lockbox, or a high shelf, we disrupt the attentional inertia. We find that the mere presence of a smartphone in the same room, even if turned off, reduces available cognitive capacity. To truly audit the mind, the evidence must be removed from the immediate sensory field. Finally, we implement the physical anchor protocol. When the thumb begins its miles-long journey, you must ground the nervous system in a non-digital stopping rule. This is the practice of unitization in the physical world. Before opening a feed, define a discrete unit of consumption. I will find 3 specific pieces of information, and then I will close the tab. By preloading the exit strategy, you provide the brain with a finish line that the interface lacks. We are not seeking to return to a pre-digital era. We are seeking to restore the digital horizon. We are restoring the right to reach the end of a page and look up. When we audit the results of these high-friction protocols, we see a dramatic restoration of cognitive satiety. The brain fog lifts as the bottomless bowl is replaced by a measured, finite interaction. You are no longer a resource being harvested. You are a conscious agent utilizing a tool. The crime scene has been processed, the exploits identified, and the sovereignty of the mind re-established. But in the silence that follows the audit, we recognize that the void of the infinite scroll is not merely a design flaw, but a calculated theft of human presence. The digital horizon was stolen to keep us from noticing the passage of time. Regaining focus is not about productivity, it is about reclaiming the right to own your own thoughts in a world that wants to rent them. End of audit.